Morning everyone, and welcome to this Hornbill webinar. This is a part 2 of 3 webinar following on from the recent Hornbill Insights event, and joining me today is my colleague Steve, and we're going to be taking you through a presentation on the Hornbill Enterprise Service Management side of things. So Steve joins me from our product management side of the business, and we're taking you through a quick demonstration. So this is a two-part sort of session. We're going to take you through a quick presentation here at the front. Steve's going to jump in and show you a little bit of the product and some of the concepts that we're going to talk about. Obviously, if you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to type them into the panel, and we will address questions at the end. Just for speed and convenience, really, we have muted all delegate audio, so do type your questions in and we will come back to them at the end and cover those off for you. Okay, brilliant. So as I say, my name's Abdi. We're going to cover off some of the ground that some of you may have seen at the recent Insights event, but into a little bit more detail today, particularly around the product, and so hopefully you'll get some good value out of what we'll show you today. So, as covered recently at the Insights event, really there's 3 mainstays to our sort of approach at the present time in regards to the critical capabilities for agile service delivery. The first one being collaboration, and some of you may have joined us for our webinar last week around collaboration. If you haven't, please feel free to look that up. The recording of that is available to you. Today we're going to talk about ESM, and we have a follow-up webinar around the area of automation, which you'll better pick up on in the following weeks. Okay. In terms of enterprise service management, again, trying to put a description or a definitive definition around ESM is quite difficult. There's lots of different ways that people describe this, and having sort of scraped the web to try and find a definitive description of it, this is kind of the best I could find. It's very verbose, if you like, and sort of stripping that back, I wanted to try and see if we could make that a little bit simpler for you guys. So in very simple terms, and again sort of highlighting the use of collaboration here, the use of Hornbill across your internal service domains to gain control over the definition and delivery of your internal services, deliver better customer service experience, to get a grip of and understanding of the insight of your value network, and most importantly to drive up productivity. That's to me the essence of ESM as far as Hornbill is concerned, and how we try and help you and our customers effectively, and your customers to embrace this concept and to take that forward within your organization. So we're going to try and show you some of that today, and definitely during the demo I'm sure you'll see some stuff here that you may be doing, but as an IT team potentially, but maybe something you might want to roll out and help your other service domains to identify opportunities for improvement across the business. So let's step forward and have a look a little bit more about what we mean by ESM. So the first thing, and probably the most important concept, and this really brings it to life for me, is just getting a simple understanding that the end users that you provide service to as an IT department are the same end users that all these other internal service providers also offer. And what we mean by a service provider or a service domain is any other department or function within your organization that's there to support and to facilitate the employees of your organization in remaining productive and delivering on the objectives of your organization, if you like. And so to identify some of those in very simple terms, here's a few. You can go a lot wider and a lot deeper, but this is a pretty good list of some of the types of departments and groups within any given organization that we regularly speak to or work with, either in isolation or in combination in terms of enterprise service management, to deliver a service management solution of types. You've got HR, the more obvious ones, facilities, finance, but you can step into all sorts of other areas. We've worked with public sector bodies around dealing with their requests for freedom of information requests, for example, where obviously there's a prescribed process in law under which they have to follow specific steps to deal with and manage those requests that come into the organization. So again, when we look at enterprise service management, what we're looking to identify is anywhere in your business or within your organization where requests are coming into a central team, department, mailbox, whatever it might be, and those the management therein, if you like, of those requests and the process that needs to be followed or adhered to in order to resolve those requests for service or such like. Okay, so lots of different areas. I'm sure I'm not pointing out anything but the obvious here, but sometimes it's good just to come back in and have a look at the different areas that we can look at. And we'll come back and show you some examples, work through Steve's demo of some of these areas. I think we're going to touch on some facilities, possibly some project management, and definitely some HR type stuff as well for you during the demo. Okay. So the key thing here is we're all connected in our organization through the services we provide to each other. So these are hundreds and thousands of little transactions that happen internally that help the organization to move forward, to remain productive. And you could describe this as your internal value chain. It's all of those things that we do to support each other inside the organization in order to maintain productivity and to drive the business goals forward, if you like. What do these service domains all have in common? Well, in very simple terms, they all have requests that come in, as I touched on there. Either it's request for service, request for information, request for help, or request for some kind of change. And again, just picking up a very simple idea, your marketing team may get requests from time to time around the website, for example. How do they deal with those requests? How do they manage them through to fulfillment within the actual website itself? So it's anywhere that there's any sorts of interactions that fall under those four categories that I've just highlighted there and beyond, you can certainly see a scope for using a service management tool to help underpin that support. So what does that look like today? And this is essentially the challenge that we're trying to help you and your colleagues and your peers within your organization with. What does it look like today? Well, the first thing, if you think about this from the perspective that you are potentially one of these end users within your organization, whilst you might work within IT or HR or finance within your organization, you're also an end user of one or more of these other service domains. Just take a moment just to reflect on how you might interact with those providers. There's probably some common traits here. First and foremost, there's probably disparate means or disparate ways that you access service with those domains. You might ring up one team to get service. You might have to fill in a form on a wiki for another service. You may have to physically visit the facilities team or phone the engineering team. There's lots of different ways that you may have to interact with these different providers. And the nirvana really would be that you have one place to go to do all of this stuff. And that's really what ESM is pointing to, is the idea that you simplify this down for your end users, give them a single point of entry where they can then interact with all of these different service domains from a single form or single environment, if you like. There's a huge variation in the end user experience. Again, just going back to that previous example, if I've got to pick up the phone for one team, fill out a form on the wiki for another team, I'm getting a very different experience depending on which provider I'm working with. Do I get any feedback? Do I get the opportunity to provide feedback? Is there any commonality in the way that I can expect to see things delivered to us? And you think about this in your consumer life, just taking Amazon as an example. You're going to go and purchase something from Amazon. It may be directly from Amazon, or it might be from one of their partners that would then facilitate the delivery of that product or service to you. The key thing is that the interaction is common. It's a very simple, standard user experience that you get as a user, regardless of all of the complexity that might be set behind that, in that Amazon obviously ship that order off to their third-party partner, who then would deal with sending you that product or service out to you. So, this is the key thing. We're quite comfortable with all of this stuff in our consumer lives, but oftentimes we come into work and we take a much lesser experience and live with it without thinking to challenge and improve that in some way. Poor definition and understanding of internal services and value chain. I mean, this one's quite a hard one to describe, but in essence, what we're talking about here is the idea that you need to know exactly who provides what service to whom, and in particular, those services that cross over service domains. I'm just thinking of a good example in IT and HR perspective would be a new starter. There has to be clear definition of who has what role and what responsibility and where those boundaries lie in order to make sure that service is delivered end to end to the end user in a way that doesn't expose those gaps and leave you open to failures, if you like. So a good definition and a good understanding of what services you provide, who you provide them to, who supports those services, what is the end-to-end business process, are there any specifics that you need to think about in terms of responsibilities and roles. All of that needs to be nailed down, and in the absence of that, you're leaving yourself open very, very much to failing based on the fact that things can fall into the cracks, if you like. Multiple tools and solutions. So again, we've talked about the disparate means, but there will be different tools around your organization, and they may be well embedded. Your HR team might have a HR tool that they're perfectly happy with, and your facilities team will probably have some kind of tool that potentially they use for preventative maintenance and all of the sort of scheduling around that side of things. What we're talking about here is having the opportunity to front end all of this potentially with a single unified system, in that you give the end users a single portal to go into. You can define all those services in the service catalog within Hornbill, and ultimately then use the Hornbill integrations to potentially push those requests back into the tool that the service domain might favor or already have in place. The key thing, though, is that you're not having your end users go to multiple different portals, having to remember different logins, following different processes and procedures. And as I said earlier on, the experience is very, very disparate or disjointed, if you like. So that's really the challenge that, as we see it, and I'm sure Steve will show you how we pull all that back together as part of our demo. Okay. What's required? Well, I mean, that really depends on your perspective. And so we're going to step through this in 3 different perspectives. We're going to start with the end user. So as an end user, as somebody who receives service from one of these domains, you'll probably be familiar with some of these challenges. What would you like to see as an end user? Well, certainly as an end user, I'd like to see a consistent approach. I'd like to be able to know that regardless of my inquiry, my query, my service request, my challenge, I'm going to get a consistent approach to the way that's dealt with, depending on not depending on which provider I speak to. I get the same service front end, if you like, from all of them. I want it to be convenient. Oftentimes the issue I'm experiencing might happen outside of hours or at a time that isn't covered specifically by or manned on the phone by the service provider. Maybe I'm writing a report and that happens to be at 2 o'clock in the morning and I can't get that information or access that service that I need to access. I want to be able to report that when it's convenient to me, not when it's convenient to the provider. And again, this is something that we live by outside of work, and somehow we give that up when we come within the office walls. It needs to be accessible. So again, it doesn't need to be something that I have to go and find that paper-based form and fill it in and hand it in. It should be accessible to me wherever I am. I want to be on my mobile. I want to be able to do it from wherever I am, whenever I need to. It needs to be informative. So this portal, this platform needs to be able to provide me information and therein obviously empower me to help myself, not necessarily rely on the provider. Again, you'll find that if you take away your work hat and put on your consumer hat, you'll find that you spend a lot of time potentially doing this stuff outside of work. You've got a problem with your Mac, you're going to go and find information, try and fix it yourself, and it's only as a last port of call potentially you might ring up and try and or log in a ticket with the service provider, if you like. So again, being empowered is something that's important as an end user. So I'm sure you'll find all of those, if not all of those, to be useful things to consider when you're looking at rolling something out in the space of ESM. In terms of the service domain, what's important to me as a service domain owner, if you like? Well, I want an approach that's going to improve my efficiency. No one wants to work in a less efficient way. So whatever we're going to put in place here needs to help us with our efficiency. It needs to give us a better way of working, deliver greater value. And as it says up there, improve customer satisfaction. No one wants to think that their end users are not satisfied with the service. For a lot of providers, when we start talking to customers and specific service domains, they have no idea of how satisfied or unsatisfied their end users are, because they don't have the ability to go in and make those sort of satisfaction surveys. So building that kind of thing into your plan for ESM is key and fundamental to what we can show you today. Again, think about the compliance. Wherever there's any compliance or regulatory issues that you need to stick with, or legislative issues that you need to adhere to, this is a key area where ESM and this idea of bringing service management to bear is important. I'm thinking about things like facilities management, where you've got to comply with safety, health and safety side of things. I'm thinking about HR service management, where we're looking at things like your process that you need to follow around some of the more severe things around HR, so grievance and such like. There are specific processes that you as a service provider will need to be able to evidence that you followed, and that might not be immediate. It might be 2, 3, 4 years down the road when somebody comes back with some kind of litigation. You have to be able to kind of show that you followed due process, and having a system that allows you to automate and build that into the system is going to be beneficial. Again, things like security. As a security team, you're going to have different inquiries coming in. Can I sign up for this SaaS service? And you're going to have to be able to go through and evidence that you've done all the due checks that need to be in place to sign off the sign up to that particular service, so that down the road, as a team, you've got the audit trail to say that you've done what you needed to do. So there's lots of things that fall into that one bullet point, but hopefully you get the gist of where I'm going with that. And then obviously management reporting. As a provider, your very existence depends on making sure you're delivering good value back to the business and being able to evidence that in order to leverage more budget or more people or whatever it might be that you might need. So management reporting and KPI reporting is important at this level. So, all of this comes back to the idea of being able to market your value. It doesn't matter how good you think you are if no one knows about it. So making sure you can provide those audit trails, provide that reporting, provide that customer sat feedback around that, show good value, and obviously show good efficiency. That's all going to be beneficial as a service provider. I don't think anyone would see otherwise. So last but not least, the organisation. So what does the organisation want to get out of this from an ESM perspective? Well, we want improved productivity. I mean, that's ultimately what this is all about. This is about servicing your employees, making sure they remain productive. From an IT perspective, that's keeping their IT stuff up and running, their services up and running. From a human resources perspective, is making sure they're healthy and well balanced employees that are happy to work for your organisation and dealing with all the challenges that come therein. So it's all about that side of things, and depending on what your perspective is, obviously it's making sure that productivity remains high. Greater collaboration. So this is breaking down those silos. ESM actually forces you to stop working in silos and brings you into this world of having to work across these different providers to define your service catalog, to define those boundaries, to create dialogue across those different providers. And again, obviously from our first webinar that we talked around the collaboration side of things, you'll be able to see how collaboration can help with that. But obviously at a high level, greater collaboration across these providers means that you can deliver a better service for everyone. Improve visibility of your network, value network rather, and obviously this is just, in very simple terms, having a properly defined service catalog with properly defined ideas of who subscribes to what, who delivers what value to who, what your KPIs and your metrics are, in order to make sure that everyone knows their responsibility in this value network and are meeting those responsibilities to ensure the best productivity for the organization. Obviously, continuous service improvement and then governance and compliance are obviously key things as well from an organization's perspective. So that said, what is the answer to this? Well, the answer in obvious terms, being as we were looking at Hornbill webinar, is the Hornbill Service Manager. But this is, nothing new here in terms of the IT's perspective. IT already has this expertise, knowledge, and tooling to assist in this transformation internally. But if you take these key points here, the ability for the end user to self-serve, that's doing it when I need to do it, when it's convenient to me, through the portal. Ticket management from the service provider's perspective, being able to actually bring these requests into under control. It's not the endless post-it notes on the never-ending spreadsheet. It's actual tickets that can be managed and process applied to those, if you like. Request fulfillment, knowledge base is key. Obviously, being able to push out knowledge. You are the domain expert in your area. Let's get some of that knowledge out there. Cut down on those calls into the team and spread that knowledge a little bit further out into the organization. Having that defined catalog, obviously workflow, process and orchestration, and then that last but not least, MON analytics. So again, without taking too much of Steve's thunder here, those are the key areas that Hornbill Service Manager functionally provides, but hopefully in the context of what I've just described, that all makes sense to take this expertise that we have as an IT team potentially, or within your organization, your IT team are probably using a tool that has this kind of capability and trying to roll this capability out across these other domain providers. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Steve, who's going to take you through a demonstration.
Thanks, Abdi, and good morning, everyone. So really just following on from what Abdi's been introducing, just really want to sort of give you some real-world examples of how you could apply this with Hornbill. And the easiest and quickest way to demonstrate that would be through that service portal, that single destination for your common customer. And as Abdi alluded to, each of those service providers, domain providers within the business, would obviously be up to them to work with IT or independently to define the services they offer, to define their catalog options in terms of what the employees can request or ask for, to publish out knowledge and how-tos to reduce the calls, as Abdi mentioned, provide news and information that's relevant to people that take those services, and obviously, if appropriate, any problems or issues that they're having as well. So each customer would get a tailored experience of this, so they would only see those services from those different service providers based on being subscribed to those individual services on here. So we can have a look at some examples. We've got our people services sort of category, under which we might have some of our common HR type content, and that might be, where do I go if I want to see how my leave's calculated? So pushing out FAQs that allow them to review that and understand that for themselves means that's one less question that we have to log and deal with, because we can allow them to self-help and promote that way. If not, then what sort of options do they have? Do they have a simple facility to ask a question? Where can they kick off a more formal process? And that's exactly where the request catalog definitions come in. So in this context, we've just got some very simplistic examples. And I'm just going to go ahead here, introducing that concept of progressive capture, where we gather the information before a business process takes care of where it's routed, what service levels is invoked, what tasks and authorizations are required. So we could just put here, what is the company retirement age, and fire that off. These things can be as simple or as involved as they need to be. The key thing is, though, that this will be triaged automatically to the relevant team that are then going to respond to that request. It's logged, it's audited, we've got that record of that. So we're going to work through just a few sort of examples of this so that we can pick those up and look at those in terms of how our teams can work together to fulfill on it, or where required, they can retain that isolation or work in a silo, so that people in the IT team don't necessarily see what the HR requests are that are being handled, and vice versa. So all those options are there. There's also the concept as well that you might have lots of different teams that may or may not want to come across to using this service management tool. They might have other tools in which they do their day-to-day work, and they might just actually want to initiate the logging of these requests to kick off a ticket, a project, or whatever it may be, in a third-party tool. So again, it's just still about providing that single destination for the common customer, which would automate the creation of that request in a third-party system. So I'm just going to use this option where maybe they've got the ability to request or initiate a project. That project might need to be reviewed by the business, approved, before it's then passed off to a team that uses another solution. So I'm just going to go here, and I'm going to suggest that we need to relocate one of our offices. Let's just put here, move out of London, office too small for new headcount on there. We need to give ourselves an opportunity to do that, so we'll whiz that through to later in the year. Any risks? Well, obviously going to be risk in this type of project, so relocation of staff. On there, we're going to handle this all with internal staff. Now, the project, in this person's opinion, might be small or large, sounds relatively high. And again, this is all just about information being provided for that service provider. We might need to upload any supporting information. But again, I'm just going to whiz through some quick examples just to show you how we can use those progressive captures. But ultimately, once that information is captured, how the requester has visibility through that progress tracker in terms of where does that ticket sit in the process, regardless of whether it's with facilities, HR, external project management team, whatever it might be, they can still have a single destination to come back in and see what's happening with that request. So in the same way as I might raise a project to relocate an office, two of the classic things that we have here is actually, department heads either wanting to go through the practical aspects of onboarding a new member of staff, or actual recruitment of a new member of staff, actually replacing someone that's leaving, getting budget approval to do so, going through interview processes, etc. All of these are just examples of processes. And in the same way here, I'm just going to kick off that process. So it could be, let's put here, replace a lead developer. That's what my need is here. My current one is leaving, let's be optimistic, they're leaving at the end of the following month. So we've got a window to do that. The job role that we need to fulfill here is lead developer. And the salary range, again, might be over and above those ranges we put in here. It might also be my responsibility as a department head here, where I need to actually provide a job spec as we see it in here. So let's just put Excuse me, if I see what I'm looking for, just find a document that we can upload. There we go, lead developer job spec. We'll go and add that. So when this then gets pushed through to our HR team, they've got something that they can discuss and agree and approve with us. So again, we'll go through and we'll pick this one up and we'll look at how we go through getting budget approval, going through the interview processes, how we notify successful candidates and unsuccessful ones, and then how we then work with IT or other departments to actually then onboard that employee into the business. So we'll pick that one up. The last one we'll do, just before we sort of drop in and have a look at that, is actually sort of the reverse then. Okay, well, maybe we've already gone through that and we want to facilitate the onboarding of a new starter. So we'll just provide the information that's going to be pushed to IT for them to sort out here. So we'll just provide their information, put the details down. Maybe they're joining in a particular role. We'll keep the same theme here. So they're joining as a developer. They will be joining us this month. They're going to be joining our development team. As such, they're going to need a certain spec of laptop, a certain mobile. They might need access to particular applications. They might need a pass for the staff car park. They might need a security pass to get into the building. They might need access to particular applications for testing and such like. The reason for just sort of generating this one as well is that we can drive these through tasks and authorizations, but we can also look to automate the creation of users' accounts. We can look to provide the facility here where users can request their passwords are changed for different systems that each of the different service teams provide. It might not be IT's responsibility to handle password resets of the marketing solution, for argument's sake. So here, marketing can provide that facility, and through our integration and automation capabilities, we can automate that for the user. But with all that in mind, let's come back in then and have a look at this this context. So we'll come back in here and we'll have a look at Sue. Now, Sue works in our people services, HR team, office and administration function. As such, when Sue comes in here and she's looking at her newsfeed, she's going to see and use the collaborative features in relation to her. There's nothing in here about incidents, problems, changes. It's just, that's not her world. She doesn't live and breathe it. She's probably not interested in it, to be fair. But from her perspective, she might have workspaces where she wants to discuss legislation changes with her peers and her colleagues in her domain that are ultimately going to affect the employees that are employed by the company. So how do the changes in employment law affect the contracts that we have with our staff? And here, that's all going to be served up in workspaces. The newsfeed is going to provide that information back to her. It's also going to allow her just to work in the context of the documents and information that she's interested in. So, having their dismissal and sort of grievance process defined here, giving them an area where they can collaborate on the content of that, upload revisions of that document if things change based on legislation requirements. All of that can be contained in that single environment. Equally, as a service provider, I might just want to manage and be responsible for those services that I'm involved in here. So when we're looking at the service catalog options, we're only seeing the services that belong, in this occasion, to Sue, or she's got access to. Again, there's nothing relating to the IT ones, but it does then afford Sue the ability to be able to come in and create her own service catalog, set up her own customer feedback questions, use her own sub-statuses, subscribe her users to that service, define who's supporting that service. All of those aspects are there. And then ultimately as well, based on which teams are supporting those services, Sue will only then have access to the requests that have been raised against the services that, in this context, her people services team or office admin teams support. There's no access to other teams, other tickets that she can't see. So those two requests that we received, obviously we could have picked up the notifications through the pop-up here. We could have got email notifications about them, but there's two very different types of example here. First and foremost, we might just have a very simplistic query, which was about responding to what's the retirement age of our company, and that might just be a simpler case of saying, Steve, it's 67 as these things go out. It's 67 if still employed. With us, relevant categories as well that are specific to them. So we've answered their query. We go ahead, we resolve that. In that essence, there isn't necessarily a massive amount more that's needed to be done. That closes down the request. The end user gets the answer they're looking for. It's logged, it's audited. We've got the record of that interaction. If we come back up to the request list, though, we could have the complete reverse of that, which is that request to actually onboard new headcount into the organisation, where we've got a really formal process with lots of stages, lots of tasks and activity that needs to take place. So in that scenario here, we go through, we can pick up which member of the team is going to take ownership of this. This is certainly good when you've got teams that are still working with mailboxes and people are just moving emails between mailboxes, hoping someone works 5 days and they're not off Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday, so something doesn't get responded to. This way we can manage people's workloads much more effectively. Now this is driven pretty much through a series of tasks, but in here we're looking again at process, context, tasks and outcomes, things that have got nothing to do with traditional IT task management. It's all about, okay, well, I've spoken to the finance team, there is budget for this particular headcount, so we're going to go ahead and move this process on. In doing so, we might have a load of sort of practical things that we need to do, like actually advertising this internally or externally, promoting it up onto our internal website, pushing it out to our recruiters, whatever that might be, and as such, the process moves forward. And then working hand in hand with our people service and HR colleagues, we might go through and review the requirements. We might look at who's responded to that advert on the website. We might decide to shortlist the candidates. We might then want to conduct first phase interviews over the phone, use the timeline to record all the outcomes to each of those interviews. But at the end of that, we can say, okay, well, we've vetted those candidates and we're ready for the next stage. That might involve them coming on site. We might want to be scheduling those invitation letters, sending them out as emails from this request, keeping all of that communication contained in this particular request. And I'm just going to whiz through these for time, but we could say, well, we've had those interviews, we've shortlisted it down to our final candidates, we're going to have the final interviews again, email invitations to go out, responses come back, it's all audited. We go ahead, we do our final interviews, we ultimately select the candidate that is preferred, and then we might drop into those classic things like parallel processing, where we need to do a number of things. We need to prepare the feedback for the unsuccessful candidates, remove the job from the website because we've made our selection. So we're going to go ahead and complete these tasks. So we've prepared an offer to go out to the successful candidate. At that point, we're also going to prepare the feedback for the rejected ones. We're going to then push out that feedback. Again, you can have one or multiple tasks. This is entirely up to you. We're going to provide that formal offer out to the preferred candidate in here. In doing so, we're going to then probably go into a negotiation. Are they happy with the package we've offered? And ultimately, they're either going to accept our offer or reject our offer, and we need our process to cater for both scenarios. If that offer is accepted, then we maybe move on to doing how do we go ahead about fulfilling this once we now know who the new starter is. Maybe we're going to provide this information into this section here. So we might call, okay, well, excuse me, Tony Brown is joining here. We know he's joining the development team. Obviously, these can be drop downs as well if we want them to be. He's going to be reporting to Steve Robinson, that's his head of department, and he's going to be joining the organisation. Excuse me, he's going to be joining the organisation at the end of September. Now, these dates are important, certainly in this context, because as we go forward and say, okay, well, we've updated the details, there might be a number of things that we then need to prepare for that new starter. So if we come back to the top here, we can see from an onboarding perspective, we need to sort out their welcome pack, their induction program. So again, these might be assigned to individuals, teams, roles, whatever that may be. I'm going to prepare their welcome pack. But it's at this point that we might start to involve other teams. So in this example here, what we've actually got is a reminder for Sue to actually engage and welcome that new starter on the day that they're joining the business. So that task is going to appear in her list of things to do with reminders. But also, it's created a task to let the IT team know that Tony Brown's going to be joining, and he'll be joining by this date, and there's a certain number of actions that he needs to perform. So at this point, this is sort of a good demonstration where we're going to then interact with IT to actually facilitate on this. So coming out of Sue's world and coming back into Graham, one of our IT colleagues, because that's been assigned to him either individually or to his team, that's going to pop up and as an activity. We can see the activity details here. Here we can see potentially that we need to add the user to AD, set up their email, allocate the equipment, we know what date we need to do it by, we need to grant them access to the systems that are required, and then we can go ahead and we can complete that task as part of our people services driven process. Let's just go ahead, completed. Ready to start on here. And we can put that from an IT perspective, that new user is now set up and ready to go ahead of the deadline that was set. So that is really one approach that you could take in terms of using tasks within a process, but we can also have teams working together and creating completely separate requests. So we'll have to sort of look at that example as well. But whilst we switch context here to Graham, now from an IT perspective, Graham might be a member of lots of workspaces about instance problems, major incidents, all that type of thing. It's a completely different world that Sue was living in compared to where Graham's working now. But if we go to the request list, and we'll have a look at a couple of those requests that have come through. First and foremost, we had our office relocation request that came in. So if we just pick that one up and work this one through, again, it's about a request coming into the business, about a team that's having to take up and own that and deal with it, even if the team that's going to fulfill on it doesn't even use this platform. So in this case here, a project request has come in, all the information was provided. Maybe it's Graham's responsibility at this point just to confirm that all the information is ready, it can go forward to the business to be authorized as a project. So in doing so, that moves us on to the next stage. Maybe our IT director or the directors in general review that information and make a decision as to whether that's going to proceed or not. In doing so and saying, yeah, we're happy for that project to go ahead, we might then reassign this ticket to our project management office. And in doing so, automatically integrate with a third-party tool. In this case, we're using Trello as the example, where we might want to create a new Trello board for this project, create some new lines or channels in that board, and create some cards that are going to go onto that board. Now, that's all been automated through the Hornbill iBridge. In the background here, we can see now that in Trello, a new project with all the information that we talked about in terms of a project to move out of the London office because it's too small for the new headcount has automatically been created. The reason to demonstrate that is we can pass through all the information from our progressive captures into processes that might have some interaction within the business, but can automatically create tickets and requests and such like on third-party tools. Okay. Coming back though to the other example we had here, which was about a new starter who'd already been recruited, and we were just really looking at fulfilling it and not using the task approach, then let's whiz through that and look at how teams can work together with their own requests to move these new starter processes forward. So in this example here, I'm working in the first line team. I'm going to take up and do the IT aspects of this first. So I mentioned earlier that we can automate or we can have manual tasks to create users in AD. Using the Hornbill iBridge or the integration with Microsoft Orchestrator or HP Orchestrator, we can take care of creating those AD accounts for you. You wouldn't have to have manual tasks to do that, but in this example, we will. We're also then going to do things like configuring the equipment that the user needs, maybe setting them up a mailbox, and such like. Again, all this sort of parallel processing that's going to be there. Install any applications that they need. That can all be done. And then we might say, we know from their request, did they need a mobile phone? I think my guy did, but I'm just going to say no, just to move this forward for the purposes of this demo. And it's really at this point, if we look at the top here, where the fulfillment side has been completed, but then in terms of enabling, we need to work with our colleagues in facilities to sort out their security passes and parking passes. But as part of this business process here, it's automatically created a linked service request that's going to be automatically assigned to our facilities team. And if we switch context here to our colleague John, John works in the facilities team. He can see this request has been assigned to him directly. Again, in his world, he's got no concepts of IT. He doesn't need to see the IT request that's been raised. All they've been done is passed a request where they need to provide a security pass, a parking permit for this particular user. They've got some tasks to go through to complete this, and I can say, issued, and I've completed that. So as the facilities colleagues start completing their activities on their requests, if we come back up to our one here, we can see that John's activity is then posted back to that parent request to let the team that owns that new starter know that facilities are moving their task forward. The security pass has been issued. And we can also go all the way through and actually have John's request automatically close the parent request if we want to get to that point as well. We'll come up here and say we've done that one as well. We've issued that. So as well as completing the facilities request and moving that into a resolved state, if we come back up and have a look at the parent request here, we can see as well that this has been resolved. An email's been sent off to the requester to let them know that all this preparation work's been done for the new starter. And that's just really an example of facilities and IT working seamlessly together for the end goal of bringing that employee on. Now that's all great in terms of showing what it's capable of, but how easy is it for maybe someone in our marketing team, maybe somebody in our facilities or HR team to actually build and manage those services themselves, work with the business process tool, create those catalog options. So let's go through and let's add something in here to one of our services that we've got. So we'll come down to our office and supplies service that we've got here, and we've got all our options about which team support it and who's subscribed to it. But if we wanted to add an additional option, something that the employees that are subscribed to this service can request, we can just come into our catalog items here, and we could have something, book a taxi on here. So it doesn't have to have anything to do actually sort of, ticket management, if you like. It's just something that people might need to do if they've got visitors on site. Service for visitors on here. And then what we might want to do is then join up a set of questions that we have from Progressive Capture and whatever process we want to use to fulfill when we get a request for that. We might want to give that an appropriate icon on here. So we're going to choose a taxi. We're going to make this available to both the end users via the portal and our analysts, and we're going to publish that. So at that point, we've gone forward and we've created now a new catalog item using a process, using a set of questions that we previously defined. If we then come back to our portal and go to my services and have a look under our office and supplies options, here we can now see an option to book a taxi. It's come straight through. We drill down on that and we look at the questions that have been asked. So, have we got to the end of a meeting? Is a taxi needed now to take the visitors back to the train station or to the airport, whatever it might be, or do I need to book it in the future? These are entirely questions that are up to you. So I want to pick up in whatever location. Let's say that they're taking them to the airport. There's a certain number of visitors. We need this when we're booking this. Do we need 1 or 2 cars? Are we charging for this? Which department needs to be cross-charged for that? And in doing so, that request has been created and assigned maybe to reception, where they need to facilitate that with the taxi firms that you use. But again, it's just an example of a request. If we come back in now, and I know this one's going to be routed to Sue's team, so we're just going to come back in the context of Sue. We'll just log back in. And we'll have a look at Sue's notifications here. So that's going to have been an email or a message to her that there's a request for a taxi that's come in. And here it needs to be set up, needs to go now on here. So Sue's going to take ownership of that. She's going to pick it up. She's going to go ahead and say, yeah, I booked that taxi. Taxi will be here in 5 minutes. Now, rather than getting our requester then to sit there and look out the window all the time, what we can also do in our business process is use our options with our integration to actually notify, in this case, Steve that made that request, maybe through SMS as an option there. So let's just bring up mobile here. And within our business process, we can see here that we can send out an SMS to the requester, letting them know that the taxi that I booked is going to meet them at reception where they requested. It's going to take their guests to the airport, and it's going to be available in 5 minutes. So again, it's just about ways of automating all the stuff that all the different teams already do in the system. That again has not necessarily anything to do with our typical sort of IT function. So we'll just move that one down. Where's that one off? Excuse me. Should we turn that off? Brilliant. So that's very much about the creating the service, but in terms of the business processes themselves. So again, we'll come back in here with Graham and we'll have a look at our admin options for that business process. How simple or how involved is it to create these things? So in our business process tool, if we have a look at that option here where we wanted to book a taxi, all we've really done here is taken care of some routings. We've assigned it to a team. We've checked whether the taxi was needed now. If it was, we've set in priorities to high and getting it actioned quicker. We can invoke service levels if we want to. We can then do things like suspend and wait for the team to confirm the taxi's been booked. Check if it has. If it's got a 5-minute confirmation on it, great, let the customer know. We can email them. But also we can use that integration call to send them a text message. And here all we're doing is using an option to include the variables of the questions we've asked. So where's it going from? Where's it going to? From the SMS provider, in this case Twilio, that we've integrated with, what number is it going to go from? And then we're going to look at the requester's phone number to see who we need to text on there. So to do those integrations, whether it's sending a text message, whether it's creating a board in Trello, whether it's logging a ticket on one of your suppliers in ServiceNow Jira, whether it's resetting a password, creating a password, all of these automations to drive all those things that your different service providers do, that's all available to you. So just to wrap up, looking at time here, just going to look at how can we then analyze what the teams are doing. How are they achieving the key performance indicators that we're interested in as a business to drive those efficiencies? So first and foremost, each of those teams working in their own context have the ability to create views, to create charts, to manage their own personal dashboards. IT looking at things that are of interest to them, HR only looking at the people services requests that are coming through. All of those options are there. And again, as I'm sure we've looked at before, these all support drill down. They can get into the underlying requests as they need to. But the key aspect then is dropping into more sort of the analytics aspects to look at what can we do, how are we performing, what are the measures that we're interested in, creating those measures for, how many taxi bookings are we actually receiving, how many queries about retirement are we getting, do we need to provide that knowledge proactively onto the portal based on that? If we're creating measures, set targets for them, see how you're performing against those measures over time. Create measures and then use them as data providers to create widgets to go on role-based dashboards. Create your dashboards and share them with those that are interested. Define those corporate KPIs that might apply across the business. What level of customer satisfaction do we want to achieve from all of our service providers within the business, not just IT? And we might set some targets. How are we doing against that target? How are the individual teams doing? How are they doing contributing to that overall score? So we can see here that IT have a 2.67 average. Our facilities team are doing brilliant. Finance might need to look at why they're getting negative feedback in this regard, but that all feeds into this. Where are the active requests? Are our customers going to be happy because they're sitting there with 49 open tickets on here? Facilities, HR, finance are keeping their open requests low. We know that we're not going to be getting a negative perception from our customers for those particular departments. Do we want to drive people through to the portal? What is the actual adoption of the portal? How are those individual teams promoting and selling that concept, the benefits, quicker response, consistent experience that you're getting, access to that service out of hours? How are the teams doing in promoting it? Well, that 23.08% is made up of all of these teams, and how are they doing month on month in terms of all of their requests that are being logged through from the portal? We can analyze that data, as well as how long, if it's important, what are our average response times. But that's great looking at it from sort of a top-down view. But if we've got real sort of analysis needed of individual teams and how they're performing and lots of metrics, then you can get into the real sort of granular detail by daisy chaining multiple dashboards together and creating each of those teams slideshows that they might present on a big screen, or the manager or the department heads in those service areas might want a big wallboard showing them this sort of level of information. What days are they busy? How are those tickets coming through? What is being logged out of hours through the portal on here? How are they doing month on month, year on year? What tickets are being looked at or not looked at? Is there knowledge that they're being accessed or it's been provided by those different service providers? What knowledge are people looking for? How are they doing against their service? How are they doing with the feedback? The different questions that each of those service providers and their own services and their own questions, how are they doing against the questions that are being asked and the feedback they're getting? What tickets are moving around? So these are really just sort of quick examples of the types of metrics that you might want to get access to. But what we're also very conscious of, with these days is it's not just about your service management data. Your business will use a whole multitude of solutions on here, and sometimes it's about getting the data out of Service Manager and putting it alongside the data from your telephony systems, alongside your ERP solutions. And to that end, there is option with Service Manager to extract that data out into business intelligence tools like Microsoft's Power BI that we're using here, so that you can use and compare the data from those other types of tools, alongside the data from tools that other teams that are using that aren't able to migrate across the Service Manager at the moment, but you still want that holistic view across all of the teams. You can bring all of that data into sort of a business intelligence tool like this, and you can start to analyze, of all the requests that have come through from self-service, what days were they logged on, what types of requests were they, what services were generated in that fashion, or on a particular day of the week, what types of requests do we get, what services are they raised against. And then in Microsoft Power BI world, this is just about using insights and drilling down. Once you've got that information, of course, getting back to that to see what tickets make up that part, or having multiple layered views. So I might want to drill up or drill down to see it daily, monthly. And from there, I might want to see the records that make up that particular section. And just to sort of close the loop, having links to bring you straight back in to those individual requests if you want to drill down onto that data as well. So it's all about what you do, how you do it, and how you're then able to analyze how well you're doing in the eyes of the people you're providing that service to. So at this point, I'm going to pass back to Abdi, just for some closing observations.
Brilliant, thanks Steve, great demo. So just while we get the screen back up to the right place, a couple of quick reminders. One, if you've got any questions, please do post them into the GoToWebinar panel, and we'll come back to those questions in a moment. Second one, Steve touched very briefly and probably whet a few appetites there around the integration side of things. We have an integrations webinar coming up, so keep an eye out for that, and we would very much like to see you join us for that. And obviously if you missed the collaboration one last week, again, that's also available and you can come back in and watch that. So get in touch if you need details about both of those two things. Okay, so I guess having seen that, what can we leave you with in terms of actionable takeaways? And again, this will depend very much on your situation. Are you an existing Hornbill service manager user who's using Hornbill from an IT perspective and looking to grow out from there? Or are you coming in from the perspective of one of the other service domains, either as a existing customer or as a brand new prospect looking at Hornbill for the first time? So again, bear with me here in terms of these actionable takeaways. I think they're more slanted towards perhaps the former, if you like, but just to give you a sense of where we're at. Number one, looking at how to maximize your opportunities around ESM. Identify suitable candidates in terms of your service domains. I can't stress enough, you are one of the customers of all of these service domains. So just take a few moments to reflect with yourself or your team on how you are treated as an end user and how you go about making these requests across your business for new equipment, for new facilities stuff, for HR stuff, whatever it is that you are interacting with other providers for. And it might be not simply just the stuff you need to keep you working, but we've got an example of a quote later on for somebody who's using Hornbill to facilitate requests on other departments in order to fulfill what they do in terms of customer satisfaction or customer service. So, anywhere these requests are going out there, just think about those opportunities for improvement. Pinpoint those key services, and if you can, try and find those services that span multiple service domains. We touched on one there today, new starters, but there's probably loads of them in your organization. Wherever a service spans multiple service domains, there's definitely scope for improvement and being able to I guess make that more robust, if you like, in the way you deal with that. I would suggest also, if you're going out to try and win other departments over, is to think about some worked examples. Try and find a work example. Just take an example of somebody working in using Hornbill Service Manager today from an IT perspective. Go in, find that room for improvement, and actually mock up a worked example so you can go to the HR manager or to the facilities manager or the security team and say, here's an example of how we could take that really painful form that I have to fill in manually and put it in a digital format, post it into the portal, and actually show them the future. It's quite hard sometimes to see past what you're doing, and I'm putting that very kindly, I think, as a service provider sometimes. So as an end user, take your experience and play that back to those other providers. Once you've identified a service domain, then find your champions. There's going to be people in those departments that are much more I guess tech savvy, more friendly with IT potentially. Find them, buddy up, mentor them. We've seen some very successful projects where the IT team who've used Service Manager have set out to buddy up with various other departments, and they've allocated specific IT people to work specifically with departments to give them guidance and mentor them around how they could improve using service management. So again, just a few ideas on that front. As it says up here, find something visible that delivers maximum impact. People love success. Success drives success. And if you can prove this works, then it's much easier to then get your next service and your next service domain up there. Okay. Work to define service offerings. We talked earlier on about the value chain. Try and identify what are the services that are on offer. As a service domain, do you know what services you offer and who supports and provides those services within your department? And most importantly, who are subscribed to that service. Who do we support? Who subscribes? What services do we offer, and who provides that support? If you don't have that information, you're going to be struggling to roll this out. Try and think about how the end users support and raise requests. And again, obviously, look for KPIs and dashboards and visibility that will allow you to drive forward improvements, if you like. So it's important to be able to get those measurements back out. Very simple to sell to somebody using post-it notes and email mailboxes as an example. Okay. In terms of collaboration, obviously we've talked at a high level about collaboration today between departments, but this is a key thing. You're not going to get interdepartmental service value chains working unless you go out and speak to these other departments. And we'd like to think that if you're using Hornbill from a collaboration perspective, then you can start that dialogue, make it much easier to do. And I would, at this point, direct you back to our collaboration webinar that we hosted last week to give you some ideas. But you start to use the functionality of Hornbill, create a workspace, get those people into that workspace, and start talking about how you can improve things. Just that small act alone will take you forward quite a lot of steps. Okay. Focus on customer experience. Really, that's the essence of this. If your end users find this to be an intuitive, useful, user-friendly place to go, and they are able to then provide feedback, you'll find that this will be quite an enlightening set of KPIs that you'll have back. But as long as you design your service catalog with the end user in mind, you will see results. So try things with a pilot group potentially before you roll it out to everyone. Try and get those champions in your environment. We all have them, the people that you can trial things with that are going to give you good, honest feedback. Don't roll this out to the skeptic team because they will only give you bad feedback. And you need some champions out there that are going to help you to take this forward. Not everyone's an early adopter, and we can go into that in more detail. Okay. Last but not least, obviously we've got governance and MI. Steve's just talked about the reporting. I don't really need to say too much more than obviously the more of this we can manage from a reporting and a governance perspective and provide that evidence back to the business, the stakeholders, the better everything is for everyone. Okay. Last but not least, obviously, thank you very much for your time. We're going to come on to questions in a moment. But just to kind of follow up from today, if you've seen something that you like, you want to get more information on, or more importantly, if you want to go in and start talking to some of the other service domains or stakeholders and you need our support to do that, then do get in touch. We'd be more than happy to provide a demonstration to other stakeholders within your organization, whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 departments, the more the merrier. We'd be happy to come in and do some sort of WebEx or webinar to provide information about how they could use the tool. Secondly, if you are already a Hornbill user and you want to look at how to roll this out, one of the things we've done very successfully with other customers is a quick start ESP package, or ESM package even, Enterprise Support Platform package. So the idea here is that we will work with you to define a templated approach to rolling this out. So it might be that you're already using this for IT service management and you want to move to HR with a view to going in other areas later. We would work with you to define a templated approach that would help you to get HR up and running, but in doing so, we'd provide a template that you can then take forward and apply without our assistance in the future to bring on other departments. Okay, so that's something that we can offer, and again, by all means, register your interest in those 2 things if you would like to. Okay, so I think we have a few questions. So the first question here is the session being recorded and will it be available? The answer is yes, and we will send out a link to the recording subsequent to this presentation to everyone who's attended and indeed everyone who registered.
Okay, so there's also a question here relating to the progressive capture answers in the link request. So we showed an example there where we raised a linked service request as part of that new startup process to our facilities colleagues. And in that particular example, I actually wrote the progressive capture answers into the description of the originating request and then copied across the description into the subsequent request for the facilities colleagues. You can't currently copy the custom fields across from one to the other. There's no technical reason why that's not possible. It just hasn't been implemented yet. So I'd sort of say watch that space in that area. That area is evolving all the time. I think that question's actually come up on the forum, so I'd imagine we'll post back there. But any colleagues, any customers, prospects that are supporting that, then please do feel free to sort of post on the forum, look for that post, and obviously that'll speed up us getting that out and into the solution. Okay, so any other questions there, Abdi? We've got?
There was a question about building the forms. Is there any, so the progressive capture side of things, I'm guessing this is somebody who hasn't got access or hasn't been on any of the training around that sort of thing. So what's involved in building out the web forms, if you like, on the portal?
Sure.
So I know you showed the taxi example there, so as an example. I guess that kind of dovetails with another question here, which was, would I need IT to help me set this up? So if we join those two together, I guess probably something you could quickly show maybe.
We can have a quick look at that. So if we just come back in here and we have a look at the admin console here. So we showed how to build a business process, but we also we showed how that was done through a drag and drop canvas. Creating those questions is exactly the same process. So if we take that book a taxi example on here, those questions that I asked about when's the taxi needed and such like, that was just what we call custom form. So here I can create my own questions. When is it needed? What date and time? What's the pickup location? Choosing all the sort of attributes about whether it's a single line, whether it's a date, time control. Really, once you've built one, you can build 100. It's really just a case of getting familiar with the interface, but it is drag and drop canvas. If I want to add in new questions, it's simply a case of drag and drop, either a custom form that we just looked at or one of the out-of-the-box questions, and that might be anything from, adding attachments or what site does this relate to. Really simple and easy to use, but once you've been shown and you can build one, you can build 100.
Excellent. So definitely no JavaScript or coding required.
No, not at all.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay. I think we're almost out of time, or pretty much out of time. So all it remains is really for me to say thanks to everyone who's attended the webinar today. We will send out the links. I'll leave you with this quote from a customer here, but we will send out the links to everyone who's attended for the recording, and it will be made available to you. And we look forward to hearing from you in regards to following up and also potentially attending our next webinar in the series of 3, which is around the integration side of things and automation. Thanks again.